Welcome to Cycling Fashion Week, the only podcast in the world purely focused on cycling style, fashion, aesthetics, and culture. I'm your host, Alex, joined by my world famous co-hosts, Warren and Tony. And Cycling Fashion Week is brought to you by our good friends and partners at Le Club, leclub.cc. Le Club believes that every cyclist should demand more from their cycling experience. And that is why you should, in fact, go to leclub.cc and check out their incredible selection of the best, the coolest, the hottest brands in the cycling world right now. They've got a very large selection of map kit. They have universal colors. They have Albion. They have Sweet Protection helmets, Alba Optics. They've got it all, not to mention the best coffee in the business, fast worldwide shipping. leclub.cc. Check them out. Use the code FashionWeek15 and get 15% off the best cycling apparel over at leclub.cc. FashionWeek15. Use that code. Warren and Tony, this is our 1 year anniversary of Cycling Fashion Week. Can you believe it that 1 year ago we launched this podcast?
I mean, I can believe it because it happened. Time stops for no man, and I think it's really impressive what we've done. I think most importantly, it's impressive.
Credit to us.
Credit to us. Our sort of like improvement and progression. Like I really feel like we're like the Peyton Manning of podcasters. Like we study the game. We re-listen to every episode. We study the game tape. We sort of, we admit our faults, what we can do better. We talk to each other. We didn't like that.
I think we're more the Tom Brady of podcasts where, drafted in the 6th round, was a backup quarterback, wasn't really supposed to do anything, but somehow through hard work and dedication became the GOAT.
Yeah, we have commitment, commitment to the audio playback, commitment to what we got to do. We hold no bar against each other when we're talking about what could be improved from the podcast. Like we've started from very little, and honestly, we've done an incredible job that people are very happy with.
Despite the fact that this is a pretentious cycling podcast, you guys both went for football player analogies for our success. I just want to point that out.
Peyton Manning was known for his time in the game in
North America,
and his giant forehead as well.
Yeah. In Brazil, they knew about how much time he was spending in the film room.
Sure, right.
Brady's the GOAT. 1 year anniversary of the podcast, and this is actually very fitting because we have a pretty famous guest and a pretty nice guest on the podcast today. We are going to be having a really interesting, really fun interview with Matt Stevens, formerly of GCN, now of GCN Eurosport, Sigma Sports, Zwift, from the Café ride on YouTube as well. Matt Stevens, I think everyone likes Matt Stevens. I don't know anyone who doesn't like him. He's just a very likable guy, very fun to be around. I had a lot of fun chatting with him. He just kind of puts everyone in a good mood, lots of charisma. So we have an hour-long interview with Matt Stevens later where he's going to talk about his perspectives on cycling style, culture, and where he came from in the sport. Do we want to debrief the Le Club Cycling Fashion Week map ride that happened in Montreal a couple weeks ago, guys?
I'm just going to say it was a great time. Felt cool.
We kind of mentioned it in the actual interview with Matt, but that was easily the biggest group ride I've ever been on, yet still quite organized and safe. The people at the club were very friendly and welcoming to us. We met them in person, and so they weren't catfishing us this whole time, which was great. And everybody that we met through the ride was very nice. I felt bad that I couldn't speak French. Not because anybody made me feel that way. That's just my own thing. I just think it's rude to not be able to speak the language. Yeah, I know. It was good. I look forward to the next one.
It was nice to meet in person with listeners. It was nice to see Jared Smith from MAP as well. That was a fun hangout, fun interview. And thanks to Le Club and thanks to MAP for that. Okay, next on Cycling Fashion Week, we are honored and delighted to welcome a very distinguished guest on the podcast today. We have Matt Stevens, formerly of GCN, now I suppose of GCN Eurosport, affiliated with Zwift, whole variety of other sponsors, but also well known for the Café ride that he's been putting out on YouTube. Matt Stevens, former pro. Thanks very much for coming on Cycling Fashion Week, and welcome to the podcast.
No, thank you very much for inviting me on. I was, as I was saying before, we in the green room, as it were, before we actually started recording. I was just saying it was actually a good friend of mine, David Millar, who put me in. We were chatting in Soho about all things not related to cycling, really, as me and Dave generally do. We don't really talk about cycling when we hang out. And your podcast came up. I said, "What are you listening to these days, Dave?" And he said, "This and that. I'm reading this, and I'm listening to this podcast. You ought to check these guys out. They're really weird, but kind of cool and a bit funky." And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, it's called the cycling. Yeah, Cycling Fashion Week." I thought, first off, what a very, very cool title. And then 2-3 months later, here you are ringing me, calling me up and saying, "Come along." And I've listened to a couple of your pods and I really like your style. So thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
So we've been called straddling the fine line between elitism and satire. And now I think we could add really weird, but really cool, and maybe quote you as the author of that tagline, cycling Fashion Week. And actually a question for you. So you say it's David Millar that sort of introduced the podcast. Question in your and we'll talk about that later on the interview, but in your relatively long career as a pro rider, did you ever race with David Millar?
Yeah, a lot. We weirdly share the same birthday, so we're both January the 4th. So Dave was born in 1977. I was born in 1970. So there's 7 years between us, but we share the same birthday. And I first raced with Dave when we both raced for Great Britain, actually, in 1996 at the Tour of Wallonia. And it was the year before he signed for Cofidis. And I think there was already at that point, there was the year after I got top 10 in the World Road Race, and Dave was a youngster and kind of looked up to me, which was really nice. And immediately I sensed, actually, in your questions, I'm going to answer one of your questions already. One of your questions is, have you ever seen somebody who has an aura and who carries themselves in a certain way that you can't quite put your finger on, which is almost intangible, but you can just feel it? And one of the first riders to do that with me was Dave. He just sashayed into the room where we were in this French, with Belgium, of course, it was Tour of Wallonia, in this little hotel. I didn't know why, but I thought there's some sort of weird star quality that Dave had, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then we rode together, and I saw that the way he sat on a bike and the way he kind of carried himself, and I knew immediately this was something. This was going to be a special guy. And we know Dave since then has had his major ups and his major downs, but we've remained very friendly throughout that. But and actually weirdly in 2000. National Road Championships in 2000, Dave asked me to sign for Cofidis, but I'd already signed for Linda McCartney for a second year. And then the following year, the team folded and I couldn't get a place at Cofidis. But so our paths have crossed a lot, but we raced against each other quite a fair bit, actually. And we did a World Road Race together, 97 World Elite Road Championships. We rode for Great Britain together. The year that Laurent Brochard won while sporting a mullet. So one of the most interesting haircuts ever to win the Elite World Road Championships as well was woven in.
Were helmets required in that 97 race? I forget when helmets were mandatory.
No, helmets weren't required. A few guys wore them. I did. Or did I? I can't remember. It was all a bit foggy in that particular, the end of the 90s was a bit foggy. I remember riding in a helmet sometimes and then sometimes not wearing one.
So the mullet was on glorious display then.
Yeah, I think he might have won. Yeah, with just like a cap on, or just hair. There was I don't think there was a helmet in sight. I think across the podium it was a helmetless podium. I think
it's the weight penalty. The weight penalty of a helmet just you stop wearing a helmet and everyone, those guys are going to win all the stages. The weight that those extra grams are killing gains.
Yeah, one of the all-time great mullets of cycling too is the late great Laurent Fignon as well, which I'm not sure it was really designed as a mullet, but it's just he had a receding hairline and he was going bald, yet he had that flow in the back
it would be known as a skullet. It's colloquial known as a skullet, where and I think yes, less intentional than a kind of cut mullet, more a gentleman who's losing his hair but doesn't want to fully give up on what the inevitable is. So they sort of keep growing out what exists, but then they're losing on top, and they I mean, at least he rocked it proudly and didn't sort of cover the top with a hat. I'm proud of him for that. He just sort of slicked it back and threw it in a ponytail.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a mullet. I've never heard of the phrase skullet. I think what we might have to do is wait until it's introduced into common parlance before we actually fully inaugurate that word. But I think it's a good start. But no, Fignon had something. It was the back end of the 90s, and no, it's the early 90s. And when you think there were two key proponents of the ponytail at the back end of the 80s, early 90s. Oh, there was a third, because the third one was me. It was because I had a ponytail when I had a mullet. So it was Fignon, and Robert Millar had a little ponytail. If you look back through some photos, it's Fignon, Millar, and then on a really deep in the mix was me, because that's what I wanted to look like, because nobody else kind of did it. And even then, when mullets were everywhere, the ponytail was another proposition in pro cycling. So yeah, it was a special time.
Be amazing if that ever came back to the pro peloton. Like, I don't think Jumbo Visma, I think they're too serious. Like they're too, marginal gains, sort of like formerly Team Sky, now Ineos. They're much too serious to do that. But I could see the likes of EF Easy Post, like, unveil a bunch of mullets along with Palace kits.
Didn't Mitch Docker rock a mullet for?
Yeah,
a
he did
while?
For a while. Yeah, for sure.
He still does. He still even now he's just a normal civilian. He still has a mullet.
Fellow podcaster. He's a fellow podcaster.
Yeah, we cross-pollinated. We met up at the tour most days, just our paths crossed, and we ended up. I was carrying around my little micro podcasting machine, and we ended up guesting on each other's respective pods, which was quite nice. But yeah, he's a lovely guy, but a great moustache, and a great Australian hairdo.
Yeah, beautiful.
So Matt, great story about racing with David Millar, and that was actually one of my questions. Was he always the stylish kind of guy with a lot of panache that we know him to be today? And your answer seems to be yes. There was evidence that he was a heavily panached individual, even when he was a youngster in the 1990s.
He was a bit of I wouldn't say a rock and roll star, but he was in that mold of somebody that tried to do things a little bit differently, and success came to him, as you know, very, very quickly on the bike. But he had a slightly unorthodox upbringing. He was quite a cosmopolitan, international upbringing. Didn't really have anywhere that he properly called home. So he was moving around because of what his father did for a living. But he was quite well educated. So quite not that cyclists aren't intelligent, but an intellectual is probably, I think, is the fair. But with that, he had a particular style. Yeah, a bit of an intellectual, loves his books, and thinks a little bit differently, and carries himself a little bit differently. And his style, I mean, you just got to look through some photographs on Google. Just Google Dave Millar haircuts of the early noughties, and you'll see what I mean. He was like, there was a shocking blonde look. It was kind of rocking. I don't know. He could have been in like an early iteration of Blink 182 for maybe 6 months. So there was a lot of stuff he really liked, and still does. A baggy trouser. He's never been a slim fit trouser kind of guy. I mean, even for the last 2 decades, if you look at his trouser styling, or pants as you guys call them, always very voluminous trousers.
Well, the pendulum is swinging back that way currently. I mean, the 2010s were very slim, very skinny, but now it seems like we're going back in that other direction. So
yeah, it's very boxy, isn't it? It's all like box fit stuff, slightly bigger t-shirts. Yeah, and it takes me back to, I mean, my lad who's 21, 22 is at University of Manchester. Yeah, he dresses like I would have dressed in 1992, 93, just everything oversized.
I was just going to say that I see these skateboard kids that must be, 14, 15, and they're wearing exactly what I wore at 14, 15. It's like they went back into the mid 90s and raided my closet or something. It's funny how it shows we're old, we're vintage now, we're retro, we're a retro look.
And the mushroom haircut is even back, like the bowl cut, the mushroom haircut with the middle. But
that was just because my dad didn't want to pay for me to go to a barber. That wasn't. They're paying for these cuts. They're not having their dads do them.
Yeah, because like cuts back then was like when my I didn't go to a barber's or a hairdresser's till I was maybe 20. My mum did all my haircuts. And then I just didn't have a haircut for like 2 years. There are photos that exist. I'll have to dig them out.
So Matt, speaking of your childhood, so one thing we ask all of our guests here on Cycling Fashion Week is what's your personal story with cycling? How did you get into it? So you grew up in the United Kingdom, North London, I think, Matt, is that correct?
That's right.
Where
Yep.
North London, Arsenal or Tottenham?
Liverpool, weirdly.
Oh, Liverpool. Oh, interesting. Okay. So a little bit out of the geography there.
Yeah.
But so tell us about your personal story with cycling, how you got into it, what attracted you to cycling? Was there, so, another follow-up question that we ask as well. We're a cycling fashion podcast. We're very interested in the aesthetic elements of cycling. Was there something cultural or aesthetic about cycling that attracted you to the sport as well?
Yeah, I can answer that in one, really. I'll try not to ramble too much, but so I was brought up in a family where was primarily my dad. My mum was really into keep fit. So my mum was a keep fit instructor she was worked in a school as well. But she was a kind of keep fit instructor. So think back to, bless her, now departed, Olivia Newton-John in kind of a leotard with leg warmers and big hair and a headband. That was my mum in the 80s. And then my dad was a police officer who'd been in the military, but just loved sport. So football, rugby, boxing, athletics, cycling. Pretty much did them all at some point, but cycling was his real true passion. And as well as racing at a reasonable domestic level, he wasn't an international rider, wasn't professional, but loved it. I was always aware when I was growing up of cycling magazines dotted around, Winning Magazine, Cycling Weekly, a magazine called Cyclosport International, which is a long gone magazine from the 70s, which was beautiful because it was colour. So there's always cycling paraphernalia around. And in the 70s, I was aware of my mum and dad going away to the Tour de France. And then, and I'd always ridden a bike to school from a very early age. And then in 1985, my dad said, when he'd come out for a couple of bike rides, because I was a very, very good runner and footballer, average footballer, good runner, and I got an injury, which meant I couldn't train properly and do athletics like I wanted to. So my dad said, why don't you just come out for a few bike rides? And I really enjoyed it at the end of 1985. So I was quite late, really, at 15. And then in 1986, he said, do you want to come and see the Tour de France? And I obviously knew what the Tour de France was. Even then, we had it on. We didn't get a lot of television, cycling on telly, but the Tour de France was a mainstay in the UK then. We had an hour a day for 3 weeks, which is quite a lot, so it was something that, and I remember even then videoing every stage and saving the video. So I had a little library of stages of the Tour de France, even before I was properly into it. Anyway, I went to the Tour de France, and it was the year Le Monde won. So you got the Bernard Hinault Le Monde duel within Vie Claire. And then running alongside that, without me really knowing it, was Le Monde and what he brought to the sport from a fashion perspective. He brought this fresh injection of modernity and style to it. And then you had the Mondrian kit of La Vie Claire. And you
One
had
of the great kits, I think, of pro cycling of all time. It was just very nice.
Totally. Well, that kit, and I wasn't really into fashion or anything, but it just struck me as being a thing of beauty. And so the January before the 1986 Tour de France, or the Christmas, I'd asked my mum and dad if I could have the La Vie Claire kit as a present. Back when there weren't really any plain kits available, it was just your club kit or pro replica kit. And lo and behold, I had a proper pair of Santini bib short. No, non-bib shorts, because the bib shorts weren't really a thing in the mid-80s. They were just being introduced. So you wore braces, or you just had a little cord around your waist and tightened them up. But I got a pair of chamois leather look short. And I can still remember the texture, the feel of them now. And just that colorway, with a big look written on the side. And it blew my mind. And I had the jersey as well. The jersey wasn't Santini, it was like a copy, but the shorts were actually Santini. Then I got a pair of Rudy Project glasses because Bernard Hinault wore those, headed out to the Tour and saw the Tour. And I was on Alpe d'Huez that iconic day, took some photos. And it was that point in my little 16-year-old mind that I thought, this is what I want to be a part of somehow. And I I've said to people, this is the story that I tell a lot of people because it was really important to me. Spent a week with my dad in a little tent. We bathed in the mountain stream. We cooked on a little gas stove, and we had a blast. And funnily enough, we rode up. There was a stage that finished up the Col de Granon, which was this year where Jonas Vingegaard took over the jersey. And so that the last time I climbed that was like 35, 40 years ago. So anyway, it was beautiful. And I came home and I thought, this is what I want to do. So I joined a club, Hemel Hempstead Cycling Club, at the end of 1986 into 87. And by 1988, I was British Junior Grand Prix champion. Then by 1989, first year senior, I rode the world in Chambéry for the amateurs. And then I went to live in France for 3 years. So it accelerated very quickly. But my pro career was actually quite a short one. It took me, I was semi-pro. Even when I won the nationals, I was semi-pro. I won the national road race when I was doing a full-time job. So it started really at the 86 Tour de France, and it was a combination of what the feeling the tour gives you, and also from a fashion perspective, it was just glorious.
It's a very elegant sport. I actually I was watching the most recent I don't know if it was the most recent, but one of the more recent episodes of your former employer, GCN, and they had a segment about what rules should we break. And I'm not going to criticize. We're strict on the rules, especially Alex. But one thing I really took umbrage with was the comment that they thought to defend that we should break the rules is that all cyclists look ridiculous, and I don't believe that. I think actually cycling, given what you're wearing, given the context of cycling, you're not walking around the street, is actually a very beautiful outfit. I think the sport is very elegant. I think the way a nice design kit, whether it's the cut or the pattern, sort of fits you, and the way a bike looks, I think it's not ridiculous. I think it's quite a beautiful sport.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you look at the evolution of not only bicycles, but bicycle attire, and the way as bikes, for want of a better word, have become cleaner and more aerodynamic, the kit has mirrored it. And so that there's a beautiful synergy between, an elegant looking rider. And I think a brutally elegant rider is Wout van Aert because of his musculature. But the way he carries himself on a bike, if you look at the way his kit is, everything about him, Van der Poel is another good example, just two examples of synergy. When you look at their kit and then you look at the way the bike is, it just fits. It's beautiful. But that's always been the case when you look back to the likes of Jacques Anquetil, and then the relative simplicity of his bicycle, and also the relative simplicity of a woolen jersey, leather shoes. But they match. There's never something that's, for me, there's never any. I don't think there's an era that's been incongruous, because both the fashion side and the bicycle side have developed pretty much at the same pace. But some riders clearly pull it off better than others, and they're two of the most contemporary examples that for me are like, whatever they wear, they seem to pull it off because they're really good bike riders, but they make riding a bike look effortless and poetic.
So it's funny you mentioned the development of aerodynamics and how, bikes have been made to look cleaner over time. I have this theory that I want to run by you, that I think that bike design was generally improving from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, maybe to the 2000s and early 2010s. But since then, I believe that some of the aerodynamic improvements that have been made from the engineering standpoint have actually occurred at the expense of aesthetics. And I'll give you an example that we talked about on our couple of episodes ago. We were discussing the new Cervélo S5, which actually is the bike that won the Tour de France this year, with Jonas Vingegaard and Wout van Aert also riding that bike. But there's things like that sort of triangular stem that we have right now, that 3-point stem with the hole in the middle that looks like a fork. I believe that I described it as a fork on a fork, and it seems extremely aggressively aerodynamic, but sort of takes away from the elegance of a simple stem that we were seeing before that. Do you share that theory that we've maybe gone past sort of peak aesthetics in cycling, at least in bike design, and things might be on the downward slope a little bit?
There's no wrong, as you know, you guys get all this. There's no wrong or right answer here, is there? And I've ridden I had a Cervélo, that model, for not the brand new model, but the one with the the best description was the Starship Enterprise cockpit, because that's what it looks like. And I've ridden with it, and it took me a while to get my head around it, but it's really comfy. And actually, I've grown to like it, but it took me a while. It's like Radiohead's OK Computer. I first listened to it and thought, oh my God, I'm going to struggle with this. And I really wanted to like it because I love the bends. And then slowly over time, the more that I listen to that album, the more I look at that cockpit setup, I've actually fallen in love with it. It's like, because it's so experimental, I don't think you can immediately love it unless that's really what you like, because it's progressively contemporary, but remarkably aerodynamic. But I can see why a purist doesn't like it, because it takes away from the simple elegance, even of an integrated cockpit with a stem. You know, the stem's there; it's singular, isn't it, in structure? But it's quite radical, isn't it? Essentially, a fork, a stem, which isn't a stem anymore. It's like, what actually is it? But I actually think, wow, this is actually kind of cool.
I'm not sure that analogy is going to sell Tony on that, because he's not a big Radiohead fan. But for me, actually, you've almost convinced me, because I'm a fairly big fan, especially of that album. But you've almost convinced me that Enterprise looking thing is could be eventually okay in my eyes, maybe.
Maybe.
What I was going to say is it's an interesting sort of take on bikes and cycling design as it kind of comes forward. Is I've always thought the sort of beauty of cycling, and probably one of the main reasons I like it, especially bikes themselves, is that it is a sort of a mix or sort of a dance between form and function, or sort of engineering and aesthetics. And I guess sort of what line you straddle is kind of where you might be with current bike design. Whereas I definitely love the engineering behind a bike and how sort of both simplistic but powerful it is. But I always straddle a little more on the aesthetic side and kind of want that to take a bit of precedent. Now, I mean, I'm not racing the Tour. I don't necessarily need those aero gains, but I suppose it's fair enough if there's someone who sees cycling more sort of appreciates the bike from the engineering perspective and is willing to sort of accept that the beauty might not come from kind of the way we see it, where we kind of hate drop seat stays and these big integrated stems. And if you love the kind of engineering angle of it, you'll think it's beautiful because it's pushing forward some technology. So I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it.
Yeah, I think because I'm very, very traditional. I got my foot in both camps. I love all the progressive, strange stuff because it's within the parameters that the UCI dictate. And I think although the UCI get a lot of shit, understandably, they also have a responsibility to protect the simple geometry of a bike frame, so we don't go too far either way, and it doesn't end up being a recumbent, and that's okay, you know. So they are basically, I guess, the guardians of how far we can push it. But I think innovation is really important. But I think the flip side of all the innovation we're seeing and the radicalization, and I had a really interesting conversation a couple of years ago at the Ruler Classic with Keith Bontrager, and he was talking about this event horizon where at some point everybody's going to be designing a very similar bike, which is optimal in terms of aerodynamics. So we'll wind this up, but it's quite important. He said, so the next step is basically aesthetics is going to be so important. I think we're almost there now. So all the bikes, importantly, have to be quick, and they are. All the top-end bikes are pretty much as quick as each other. But if you want to sell them, it's not just the speed now. It's like, okay, what colorways can we get? How can we nuance this so it looks really attractive? So I think the payoff is the fact with all the bikes are kind of heading to this point where they're not going to get much quicker because we're running out of that. There's only a point that a bike can go within the legal ramifications. But so it's all about aesthetics. And I think that the flip side is the acceleration of design will actually drive the aesthetic appeal of a bike as well.
Obviously, you get to test and probably borrow, and maybe you even own a lot of bikes. You know, we've seen your Sigma Sports with the Café ride. You're always on something different. You've tested stuff for GCN. What is your personal bike that you have? What's your main bike, your go-to when you're not being filmed? You don't need to test. You're just on a personal ride. What bike do you ride?
I only own one bike, and that's a Brompton. Okay, so people think so. The only other bike that I kind of own, what my dad has, which I gave to him, was the bike that I won the British Championships on back in 1998. So he still has that bike, but it's been sprayed up. So that was a giant TCR. So in Harrods colour, so gold and green. So the TCR that Onse rode back in the Jalabert era, which was
Is that aluminum?
Yeah. Aluminium with carbon bladed seat posts and forks. So my dad still has that, but I only own a Brompton. But then I do get a rotating door of different bikes. So the bike that I'm riding a lot at the moment, which is a company that I work for called LeBlanc, they're sponsored by Specialized. So I've got an Athos, which I ride all the time, which is really lovely. So most days I jump on that. But I also have a Cannondale Super 6 Evo CX, which is wonderful, which is their brand new gravel cross hybrid, which I go off-roading on a fair bit, or just go on a ride where I think I might just take a few paths and just explore the beautiful countryside nearby. So I've got 2 bikes in the garage, a third, and including the Brompton. And who knows what I'll have in the future. But they're the ones that I'm riding at the moment.
Were you influenced by David Millar on the Brompton?
It's Dave gave me it like 4 years ago. It's a Chapter 3 Brompton, yeah.
Of course. He's been trying to sell us on the Brompton for a while now. Since we
guys,
have him on the podcast.
It's been a game changer. I mean, I know this isn't an ad, but whoa. I did a lovely little video a couple of years ago, just before lockdown, actually. Rode around London, and a mate who makes skate videos videoed it, and it was an ad for Brompton. But everything that I said in that video was honest, because I was that guy sat on the tube in London, seeing people getting on and off with this folding bike, thinking, "Oh, it's like a right pain in the ass carrying that around." And then I got given one, and it's like, "Whoa, okay, now I get it." And honestly, they're just so great. One of the most marvelous bits of engineering you're ever likely to see, and just a pleasure to ride, because you change your mindset. You hop on it, you don't need to be in Lycra, you just cruise around. And I got the hairdressers, or just go to the shops. I've been to an art gallery and just put it in the corner and looked around. Honestly, just wonderful bits of kit that really are.
I want to try everything. I'd like to give it a go, but it's, I guess, like what you're saying, it changes your mentality. And I've always believed that commuters shouldn't sort of have Lycra, but I guess what I've always loved, especially as a non-European sort of looking to the European cycling culture, is the complete opposite of a Brompton. And that's a Dutch bike, where it is huge, heavy. You could probably can't even bring it up 3 stairs into your apartment. And so the same kind of mentality you're talking about, I appreciate. I think that's how commuting should be. I think Lycra should sort of be saved for the sporting aspect. And especially in North America, we notice, there's not a lot of cycling commuters, because I think a lot of people associate cycling with sport, and they think, I'm going to the hairdresser, I'm going to the art gallery, well, I don't want to sweat, I'll just take my car. And so I think it's a better mentality. But I've always loved that like a Gazelle or a British company Pashley, those big, upright, heavy things. So I like the idea of that type of commuting. I just don't know if I can get my head around a Brompton. But maybe if David's listening, he'll send us each a Brompton, and we'll.
I think I saw him on Instagram, because Matt, you guys probably hung out at the tour this year, because he was also
a little bit, yeah.
for a British television network. But I saw him on an Instagram story. I think he was climbing. I can't remember which cut. It might have been the last few kilometers of Alpe d'Huez on a Brompton, actually, which is testament to the what you can do on it.
Oh yeah, so I generally take the Brompton on the tour. So I took it to the Giro this year. It's actually done. This Brompton that I have now has done 9 or 10 Grand Tours over the last 4. No, maybe 8 or 9 Grand Tours. But it means I can put it in the back of the car, jump out, recon the last 5 or 10K before I go to my commentary booth. Go out for 45 minutes in the morning. I'd stick a bit of Lycra on and my trainers, flat pedals, and just ride off. And I've got no real. Because I've been around a long time, I'm not fussed with what people think of me. I just go out, and it makes me feel good, and I can get my adrenaline fix, my little endorphin dump. And also from a practical perspective, to scope out the finishes on a Brompton is absolutely marvelous. And then you cross the line, fold it up, and it's in your commentary booth, and just seriously. So Dave rides around on one of those. Ned Bolting, who's a colleague that we both work with, has got one as well. But they do, we ride, because of the gearing on the Chapter 3 versions, but there's a 6 gears, really wide ratio. You can climb up pretty much anything if you're relatively fit,
We've been going in different directions here, but I just want to back up a little bit to your career as a pro before we, I ask you more current questions about your race commentating and what you're doing now. You mentioned you had a relatively short career as a pro. You had a longer career as I guess you call it semi-pro, or you worked in the police at the same time as you were racing and even won a national championship. Let's talk about your career as a pro. Talk to us about some of the teams that you rode for, some of the kits that you wore. I'm sure there's some that you look at today that you think, my God, that was awful. What's the worst pro kit or team kit that you got to wear in your career as a racer?
I should have dug them out because I've got so much kit over the years, but I've had a couple of clear outs. But I've got one jersey from every team I ever rode for. I'm quite lucky. There was never or have I? Yeah. Okay. 1999. So 1998, I rode for Harrods. So the famous shop in London. Yeah. So racing green and gold on the jersey has got the Harrods, the famous iconic Harrods logo with the shop in the background. Harrods on the shorts. And it was a really nice, simple kit. I wouldn't say it was understated, but it worked. And then for the following year, we got sponsored, same sponsor, Harrods, but we were also sponsored by Sixt Car Rental. So Sixt ended up on the sleeves here, on the top of the shoulders. But the green color palette changed, and they insisted. So before we had black shorts with dark green side panels and golden writing, but for 1999, we had horrible green shorts with bright yellow side panels. And they were absolutely atrocious. They were hideous. But because I was national road champion, I had to wear my white national champions kit. And back then, in the late 90s, there wasn't as much custom kit. Yeah, you got your jersey, but there wasn't really a lot of custom options outside of that. So I had to wear my white national champions, British champions jersey, green and gold shorts with Northwave shoes, which were really bad. So I binned off the Northwave shoes, wore Carnacs, but for the whole year had to have socks over my shoes. Back in the day when overshoes were a thing, but not skin overshoes, so everybody wore socks over their shoes and like cut a hole in the bottom for the shoe plate. So I'll send you a couple of pictures from that era. So from the top up, I look good. And then say good, but then we had to wear Rudy Project freezer helmets, which were one of the most awful monstrosities of helmet ever invented.
So I'm curious. So you didn't actually get to wear the white bibs with your white national champion, Adam Blythe style.
No. So Adam Blythe wore them, as you know, as is well documented, with aqua blue, and he pulled it off. Russell Downing, he had white shorts or a couple of white short options, but that wasn't even on the table. That just wasn't the thing. That didn't even enter. I could have asked, I guess. But I just got given the kit, and it was just the jersey that was the only concession to being national champion when I was national champion. But if I'd have had the offer, I would have said no. Some riders can carry it off. I wasn't the rider to carry that off. I'd have been a black shorts kind of guy.
It's very polarizing topic.
I don't believe it, Matt. I think the legendary Matt Stevens could have pulled it off. I think that. I mean, the shirt you're wearing currently shows you've got some panache. And I think that you would have, it would have been iconic if you had it.
Who knows? I mean, because once, as you know, once you become national champion, world champion, you get the tipping on your sleeves the rest of your career, and that's a nice thing. But we did a couple of years ago. Me, Adam Blythe, Steve Cummings, Bradley Wiggins all went out on a ride during lockdown, or when lockdown eased, and we called it the Friends Ride, and we all wore our national champions kit from the respective years, which was kind of cool. We're going to try and do it again in the future. I'd like to make a contemporary custom kit of my national championship kit of that year, and maybe have a white shorts option. So I think I'm going to chat to Adam about some, because there's a couple of brands that I work with or I've made kit for before, which you might not know about, which we can talk about in a minute if you'd like to. But back then it was never really something that there were a couple of teams at that time in the UK that had pink shorts, and there was one team that had white shorts. There was an American team that had white shorts, actually. I think Rock Racing had a kit with white shorts, which were horrendous. And I remember riding behind those guys in some crits, which was wet, and you could see their arse cheeks and their fucking hairy asses through the transparent wet. So that was burnt into my mind that there's no way ever I'd ever wear white shorts. But for a sunny, dry ride, for a one-off photo shoot, I'm not going to rule it out.
So we're very pro. We're on the record as being very pro white bibs here on Cycling Fashion Week.
Okay.
Understood, it's for special occasions. You may not wear them many times, but it looks incredible. And I just want to be on the record. If you ever get together with Adam Blythe, Bradley Wiggins, and all of the former British national road champions, you update the kits to make it more 2022 looking, and you all wear white bibs. This is going to be the epitome of Cycling Fashion Week. It's going to be incredible. We want to see this. We want you to broadcast it to the world because we definitely want to see that.
That photo would go viral for sure.
Yeah, that's got to be a cafe ride there.
Okay, I've made a mental note of that.
You did actually when you were. I remember when you were commenting. I can't remember which race it was, but Mathieu van der Poel was the world champion, and he was wearing the white bibs, and you actually used, I believe, you called him superb. You said he was superb in his white bibs that day, and I think that really resonated with me because that is how I see white bibs when it's done well.
Yeah, I think he was actually Dutch champion because he's never been world road champion.
Oh, that's right, Dutch champion.
Yeah, but his Dutch kit it worked. He didn't use that kit all the time. I think it might have been for Amstel Gold, and he actually won Amstel Gold, that iconic win when he led the group through, didn't he, for the last couple of Ks and still won the sprint. He was in white shorts. He's had a couple of big wins in white shorts, but yeah, that guy could pull off anything, I think.
As a race commentator, so I guess, we talked about your pro career here, your semi-pro career as well, but most of our listeners and mostly our younger listeners, I guess, would know you predominantly now as a race commentator and as a former GCN host as well.
Yeah.
As a race commentator, you told us a very, very strong story of your first encounter with the Tour de France, which was with your dad when you traveled there in the 1980s. As a race commentator, is there one of the races or one of the Grand Tours that for you has that sort of mythical aspect? Like, which one do you prefer to comment as a commentator, and why?
So I have commentated on all of the Grand Tours to varying degrees, but the one that I've commentated on the most, and I go on site and have been on site for 4 or 5 years now, is the Giro. And it's the only Grand Tour I ever rode as a pro. So I've got a lot of love for the Giro, and I've worked with RCS, the organisers of the Giro. So their portfolio, as you know, Il Lombardia, Milan San Remo, Sicilia, and then of course Tirreno Adriatico and Strada Bianca. So I do all of those races for that company on site. So it means, and even through lockdown, we went on site for those races, subject to stringent rules and regs, of course. So, and I've commentated a bit on the tour. My role on the tour has been more of an on-the-ground reporter with GCN Eurosport back 2017, 2018, 2019, and then this year. But I think my favourite tour to commentate on is the Giro. I think I love the tour. I love the vibe of the Vuelta. As you guys know, each tour, it's difficult to compare them because they have such a clear identity and landscape, and also culture. They're culturally significantly different. You think, but they just are. But the Giro for me is the one that resonates the most. I think I have more of an affinity to it. I just love I love the people in Italy. I love the countryside, and also part of me as a pro, because it's the only race Grand Tour I did. It's really important, and I love it. It's just a beautiful, beautiful race. It's always very unpredictable through the most dramatic landscapes. And the Giro I think it's the best Grand Tour, and I think I like working on it the most.
I agree with you on that. I find the Italians know how to make stuff beautiful, and it's just reflected in the races that they have over there in Italy. To me, one of the most beautiful races to watch on television is the Strade Bianche. Just when you see that beautiful countryside in the month of March, when it's kind of starting to get green, but not quite, and these beautiful roads. And I just find the Italians know how to really capture the beauty of cycling as well. It's almost like there's a vintage element to the Giro that you don't necessarily find in some of the other Grand Tours as well. But I agree with you. If it, obviously I haven't commentated on them, but I've visited, areas where they ride through, but I just find the way that the race is organized, the Giro definitely is, to me anyway, it's the most beautiful one.
Yeah, it's a little bit more accessible than the Tour as well. The Tour is just it's a behemoth, isn't it? It's just enormous, and it is wonderful in its own way. And it's very special, but it's a really high pressured race across the board for the riders, the entourage, but there's a little bit more looseness and almost like wouldn't say completely homespun. Something about the Giro that is just easier to access emotionally, if you know what I mean. And yeah, it is. It's like watching through sepia all the time. And I think to touch on your point about the aesthetics of Strada Bianca, when you think how relatively young that race is, people think it's a monument. It's the only race that's really, it's basically a de facto monument, but only in just over a decade. And that's because of the iconic nature. Firstly, it's a tremendous course. It's creative. That everybody loves the Starato. But also, when you look at how beautiful Tuscany is, it sums up everything in one race that's beautiful about racing in Italy. So it's accelerated its own importance just by virtue of its own inherent beauty, I think.
As somebody who came to cycling fairly late in life, like my mid-20s, I grew up thinking, and also being North American, grew up thinking the Tour de France was the only like big bike race. I had no idea about anything else. And then so when I discovered there were other Grand Tours, I was like, what? And then I think the Giro was, besides the Tour, the first one I watched. And so I think for that reason, I have this like special affinity for it, because everything you're saying is also true, but it just something about it also being the first one in the year, kind of like, even though it's not the first race of the year, it's just kind of like gets you, I don't know, almost into like that Grand Tour watching mindset, I guess.
Warren, would you say that the Giro is one of your 3 favorite Grand Tours?
It's top 3 for sure, definitely.
Is it a top 3 Grand Tour? But yeah, I see what you're saying, Warren, where it's the first time you've stepped away from the sort of masses of cycling that know the Tour, especially coming from North America, Lance in the late 90s and early 2000s. And it was the first time you realized that you were kind of a cyclist. Like for a North American, the Giro coming out, and when you sort of get into cycling and then you watch it, it is kind of one of that. And like I remember Paris-Roubaix, that kind of thing where I was like, oh, like I'm a cyclist now. It's not just I don't just ride a bike around and know the kind of basics. Like I'm starting to learn about what cycling from the road cycling really is. And I think you're right. The Giro is it's very apt for the Giro to kind of be that for a lot of people.
And Matt, you rode the Giro in the Linda McCartney team, right?
Yeah. So in 2000, I rode. Yeah.
And this is the year that you suffered a crash in the Giro, but kept going. And talk to us about that experience a little bit.
Yeah, it was the crash was on stage 2. So the race. So that year we had a prologue, a traditional prologue, not an opening time trial. So we had a prologue, then we had a flat road stage. The prologue started in the Vatican, so we just rode exclusively through the Vatican City. We had an audience with Pope John Paul II, which was I'm not a religious person, but that was the whole start of the Giro was massive. And
did he bless your Linda McCartney kit?
I don't know if he blessed the kit. Maybe he did. I mean, he was given a bike by the organisers, and he had, and I think he anointed. Well, he did, because you had Mario Cipollini and Marco Pantani were brought to the front. We're in this room, 150, 200 people, just primary riders, all huddled together, and then he came in a like little pope wheelchair. And those two came to the front, and he said a few words, and then went. So it was quite powerful, actually. But anyway, stage 2, classically for the Giro, we already went up a first category mountain, like the Giro does. There's no formula to that race, and that's another reason why I love it, because it just throws everything at you. Early doors, really hot, sunny. Went up this climb. I made the front group of about 30 guys, and then we were descending down the other side, and the heavens opened. And in Europe, generally when you've had hot weather on these baking hot roads and the rain comes, the water just beads up and doesn't really soak into the tarmac because of all the oils and stuff. So as you probably know, the roads, and I'm sure it's the same in some parts of the States, but it becomes treacherous. Anyway, loads of riders crashed. I crashed on a hairpin, got up, continued on, and was riding through this town. And there was a couple of riders that had crashed in front of me on this very gently meandering road heading into the center of this town. I was going to hit this guy, so I started to adjust the bike and just steer in another direction, but it started to aquaplane, and it was like, oh God. So I just went sides past this guy, and then it locked up, and I went over, and hit. So I landed on the deck, really hurt my knees. I don't think I was out cold, but within a few moments, I was in an ambulance. I was like, whoa. And the doors were shut on this ambulance. I was like, whoa. So I know they were checking me out and I was in a lot of pain. And then the ambulance door opened and it was my direct sportif, or one of the DSs that was looking after me at the time. And it was a guy called Chris Lillywhite, who won the milk race back in the day. He was a very, very good pro in Great Britain. And he said, "You're right." And then that kick-started me and I was like, oh my God, this could be, and it was, the only Grand Tour I ever ride. So I ended up, didn't speak any Italian, but having a gentle fight with the medic saying, I'm okay, let me out. So I climbed out the ambulance, got on my bike, and I couldn't pedal. So I had to hold on the car door for a bit on the car door, on the medic's car, and they sprayed some stuff on my knee. And I remember getting my right hand on my right knee and having to force my leg down to get the first pedal revolution going. And then I managed to get some momentum.
Sounds totally legit from a medical perspective.
Oh yeah, it was stupid. It was really foolhardy. But the when you're in that situation, and I wasn't young then, I was 30. In a matter of seconds, I think, or a matter of very short moment in that ambulance, I do remember thinking about my 16-year-old self at the Tour de France, wanting to ride a Grand Tour. And 14 years later, I'd finally got to the Grand Tour, and it was about to end after 2 days. And I didn't want that to happen. I thought I can move. I'm mobile enough, as foolhardy as it was. But I finished the stage 25 minutes down within the time limit, and I just limped through. I didn't actually finish the Giro. I got to stage 17 or 18. The rest of the Giro for me was just getting through each stage within the time limit. But so I did the vast majority of the Grand Tour, but I'm just glad it didn't end as early as it could have done. But I made the back page of the Gazzetta dello Sport the following day and stuff like that. And people at home, my mum watched it on the television, saw it happen, because I believe that the ambulance was in shot and I got out of the ambulance stuff. It was quite chaotic, but I believe there is footage of me getting back out of the ambulance.
Significant display of panache. I mean, in terms of injured riders, continuing on, there's the famous story of Tyler Hamilton, I think, breaking his collarbone and then kind of grinding his teeth during the whole 3 weeks of the tour. But yours is kind of up there as well in terms of just having the will to finish.
I think it was literally the will, and I hadn't broken any bones, but I'd seriously damaged both of my knees. But then weirdly, as you can, as the body is, I'm enormously fit, and it's amazing what willpower can do to get you through. I got through heavily bandaged up, got through 4 or 5 days, and then I actually started to get back into rhythm again. I had a couple of steroid injections, which were administered by the race doctor. Obviously, there was a different time back then, but they were legal injections, which helped me through a couple of days, and then I just got progressively worse. And I think I'd pushed myself so hard. I gave myself a chest infection, so I ended up with bad knees and a chest infection, and in the end, I just had to pull the pin in with 4 days to go. So.
Okay, shifting gears here to more kind of recent issues and obviously the topic of this podcast, which is kit. How do you find the current landscape in terms of cycling kit? I mean, it's improved so much from the 1990s and the 2000s, and I guess we could say that we always say this actually, that if Rafa hadn't existed, many of the other brands wouldn't have existed, and this podcast wouldn't even exist. But also very interesting for you, since from our perspective anyway, a lot of the cool things that are happening in the world of kit are coming out of the UK right now. The UK is a very, very strong place for various brands that are coming out, be it Albion, Rafa, Universal Colors. There's just a lot happening out of your home country. So how do you find the current landscape in terms of kit? Are there any brands that kind of have your attention right now that you enjoy wearing? Talk to us about your take there.
Yeah, it is massively interesting. And I was racing in the UK when Rafa first came on the scene, and they were a very small brand. They came on the scene, I think it was maybe 2004, 2005, 2006 era. And I was racing against those guys, and they quickly developed into an exceptionally good domestic team. And they won the national championships with Christian House, who's a Texan actually with a British passport, who won the British championships. And his national kit was great because it was Rafa designed. So yeah, their kit was lovely. But they owned the space briefly, and then as you guys know, that over the next decade and more, because that's 15, 16 years ago now, isn't it? It's a very, very busy landscape, and through my relationship with Sigma Sports. So just to put that into a little bit of perspective, when the Linda McCartney team folded and I was disillusioned with the sport, I then joined the police. and then got back into the sport, as you invariably do, because it was in my blood. I was the manager and rider for the Sigma Sports UCI team. So we're a club team, and then 2008, 2009, we were UCI registered for several years before I left and joined GCN. And all that was while I was in the police. So that the guy that runs, or that still runs Sigma Sports, has really helped me out financially after I'd lost my job as a pro cyclist. And I was not in a good position financially. He helped me out. And he's now become one of my best friends. He was the best man at my wedding. So I've got a close relationship with Sigma Sports. And when I left GCN, I called up Ian and said, hey, I'm freelancing now. I've got a couple of people I'm going to be working with. Do you want to do something? And so we collaborated. So I partner with Sigma Sports. I've got my Sigma Sports podcast with those guys. And then the Café ride, which is an important project that we do. It's done really, really well. And the podcast is up to episode 75 or something. So the beautiful thing about Sigma is the fact it's a bike shop. And all the brands that you've talked about, they sell. So I get to, and you'll notice in different editions of the Café ride, I'm generally in different kit every time. So I've got so much kit. So I get to appreciate it. And through Zwift as well. Zwift have got a current partnership with Map. So I've got some brand new Map kit that you can't buy unless you complete this off the Map thing. So I get a lot of custom, unusual kit to try, and yeah, it's quite exciting. There's some stuff's done really, really well, some stuff not so well. There's also a brand that I work with called Miltag, where I made a range of. I have a fictitious alter ego called Kenny Van Vlamik that I've had in my mind for years, and me and a friend during the Tour of Britain in 2012 started to have a routine. We put it on YouTube, and in the end, so there's this world where this fictitious direct sportif lives. He has a team that doesn't exist, but I every year I was selling kit from a team that doesn't exist, inspired by Belgian cycling. So that's something that I've done, and I was only able to do that because of the technology. So and also the amount of short runs that brands can do now. So it was a company called Miltag that were making short runs of custom kit for clubs, and they worked a lot with record labels as well. So you see like a lot of heavy metal inspired jerseys with bands, the Stone Roses, New Order, bands like that. It's a really, really exciting space, and like Universal Colors as well. I listened to your pod with those guys, and I don't think they fully explain the genesis of no, I'm not criticizing Inga and the other chap, but it was Sigma Sports who sowed the seed. Sigma Sports they were doing a lot of collaborations with guys like Black Sheep by Sigma Sports range of kit, heritage kit with all the different colors we had back in the early noughties. And then they thought, well, this kit sells really well with our aesthetic. So we need to start something off. So it was Ian and Jason basically seeded Universal Colors. So Universal Colors is a Sigma Sports company, but completely separate. So I get a lot of that. I get all I've got so much Universal Color stuff, but that stuff's really cool. I think there's a lot of nods to the fashion industry there, and the way it's shot, especially a lot of underground fashion, the music scene, skate scene. There's a lot of those aesthetics that have been brought in. Palace, of course, there's definitely nods to what Palace are doing. But they're really, so I work with them a lot. Say work with them a lot. I just get all the kit and I stick it on Instagram because it's cool. And it's just really, really great. And there were some cuts that were a bit wrong in the early days, but they listened to me. And it's like, yeah, so the cut on the bibs is a little bit low and it's not overly flattering. So lift that up a little bit so it compresses the belly and stuff. So small things. So that because they're so small, they listen and they adapt really quickly. But I have nothing to do with the designs and stuff. But it's great. It's a really exciting landscape.
So do you think we're past so actually I'm glad you talk about Universal Colors because we like them a lot. We've had them on the podcast as you mentioned. And one thing that Universal Colors is kind of known for is they're very understated, very, block colors. And they actually have a very cool color palette as well. Like their colors are kind of unique in a way, but the kit is simple. It's like block colors, minimalistic, understated. And a lot of brands have gone in that direction. And I look at you and I wish our listeners could see you right now, but you're wearing probably the complete opposite of that. It's a maximalist shirt, tons of colors. You're out there. Do you think the world of kit is going back in that direction, back towards the 1990s where crazy colors, like maximalist stuff, the total opposite of what we have today? Do you think the pendulum's swinging back in that direction? Or?
I just want to add quickly that Universal Colors has released a few new jerseys recently, and they are quite maximal. So even they've strayed a little bit.
Check this out. This is Universal Colors.
Oh wow!
So they've done the maximalist stuff as well. So this was their first range, but it clearly had Sigma Sports on it because. But look at the colorways of this.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So they've done all that stuff as well. So they've done some really disruptive designs, and this is basically a design based on maps around the area that Sigma Sport are based. But then, so that they're really quite creative. So in answer to your question, I've got to put all that away in a minute. That's never going to go back in the drawer over there, I tell you. Just look at all that big pile of kit. That's all Universal Colors. But no, I think look at what Palace have done with Rafa. I mean, whatever they stick out, I really like what they're doing. I think every iteration gets better and better with the stuff they're doing with EF. But I think it will just ebb and flow. And I think there's so many players now trying to be disruptive that it's just, I think because it's such a busy space, you've got to do something really special to get noticed. And I think when a space is busy, it means that people have just got to get better and better and better at doing what they're doing to make a mark, to keep their heads above water as well. Because Panormal is another one. I've got some Attacker kit in there as well. I really like Black Sheep as well. Black Sheep makes some really high quality. I've got some of their stuff that's more, it's like some gravel kit, but really fitted, but more like wool base, which is really, really nice. So, but in a really neutral colorway. And the other day for the Ben Foster shoot with Sigma Sports, I was wearing brown woolen socks. And that was stuff made by Pedalhead, the Japanese company. And their stuff's really, and I know I heard you talking the other week, and you guys were a little bit torn about the hybrid kit, where it's like, it's not quite mountain bike kit, not quite road kit, but it's like wants to be both. And is that, but Pedalhead have done some stuff that I think just hits that sweet spot without upsetting too many people. But it's a massively creative space. And I'm lucky enough, because of Sigma being a big retailer, and they have relationships with most of these brands, that I get to try it all out. So I'm quite privileged, really. And some stuff is better than others, but we always curate. I'm quite fussy because they'll give me stuff and I'll say, I don't really want to wear that, because I won't wear something that's I think is shit. I really won't. And I'm quite privileged to be able to do that. And we did it back in the GCN days, because we had a lot of brands coming to us and saying, can you, but I wouldn't want to wear anything or sell anything. I know we're all different to people that look to me unless I thought it was really, really good. I've said no to a lot of stuff.
Do you still wear the GCN kit sometimes?
I don't, but I have it all. I have at least one set of every iteration. We had Assos, we had Santini for years, and then Assos. So I've got, and the guys at GCN, I had the little stripes with the GB champion stuff. So I've kept all that. I'm quite a bit of a hoarder. I do get rid of a lot of stuff, but I like to keep one set of kit. So I've got these big kit bags in the garage full of stuff from 85 all the way through to now. So maybe you guys, we should just have a separate edition. We'll do a video.
Maybe one day in Derbyshire, you open the Matt Stevens Kit Museum or something, the Kit Library.
First Cycling Fashion Week YouTube could just be could just be a tour of all your kit, and so we love ranking things here, so then you can sort of pick out what you like the best, what you don't like, and we're a hot takes podcast. We love hyperbole and going and saying things are garbage when they're only sort of not what we like.
Yeah.
And so just going wild. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. This is the worst thing I had to wear. I love this. That'd be a great first foray into YouTube.
Matt, we'll wrap it up with what we do with every guest that comes on the podcast. We do a series of rapid fire questions. So we ask you quick question. There's usually two choices. You answer quickly. You give us a quick explanation as to why, and we move on to the next. So I'll start. What's your order of choice at the Café ride? Is it tea or coffee?
Coffee.
White or black shoes?
White.
White or black socks?
Both. Can I say both? Because I move them around. I was a white sock guy until until I saw Armstrong wearing black socks. And then I thought, why didn't anybody think of this? Because there's so many, because I have white socks, black socks, and then turbo trainer socks. And they're the socks that have turned grey, which were once white, that you never wore outside. So I have this drawer. It's like I call it my, I know I'm going from a slight tangent, but it's called my graveyard drawer. And it's socks that physically are in good shape, still have good elasticity and stuff, but the color is gone, but I don't want to throw them away. So I have like a graveyard drawer, which is like turbo socks.
We could do a whole episode on turbo trainer kit, because that's where kid goes to die, generally speaking.
Talk about seeing someone's hairy ass. That's what the turbo. That's what the bibs that built have the window at the back there. That's what they go on the turbo trainer. But we always say we're fine with white shoes, black socks. But we always say, especially Alex, he's the most proponent in this. Black shoes, white socks are never acceptable. What do you think?
I think that's fair, but I might have been guilty of it in the past just to be contrary. I think I might have just tried it. Yeah. But at the moment, I'm all about white shoes and white socks. Because when it's sunny, it's something about a white shoe and a white sock combo. It's just, there's a purity to it.
Do you feel the need to match the helmet? White helmet as well, or the helmet can go wherever it wants?
I'm lucky enough to be sponsored by Oakley, and they give me a load of helmets, so I just mix and match. So I am now looking at helmet color and jersey color, so I'm a little bit, before it's just helmet on and out. Now I'm like, I've got this color, I've got an iridescent one, I've got a gray one, I've got a white one, I've got a blue one. So I'm quite lucky. So I do now match my helmet with my kit. I'm guilty of that.
Okay, Matt, next one: carbon, aluminum, titanium, or steel?
Aluminium. Sorry, aluminum. You got aluminium.
Is that what a Brompton's made of?
No, they're made of. The new one's made of titanium, but they're steel.
Okay, all
right. Why aluminium? I think you're the first one to choose that.
I think because my fondest memories as a bike rider were on an aluminium bike.
My road bike is actually aluminum. It's like a small frame builder in the US. Mine less so fond memories, but I support this choice.
Yeah, we all ride metal bikes here.
Yeah, we all no carbon in this group here.
All right. Well, I'm kind of non-carbon. I've got 2 carbon bikes and a steel one. So, but I don't even have an. My dad has my aluminium bike, but aluminium because of its not because it's particularly good, but it's just that when I raced on it, all my best sensations. That's a super Euro word, isn't it? Sensations doesn't really even make sense. All my best sensations, I'm going to use it anyway, in my career have been on an aluminium bike, so that's why.
Okay, next one, Matt. Road or gravel?
Ooh, road.
We support that.
Thank you. I was sweating then.
GCN kit or rock racing kit?
A GCN kit, mate. GCN kit. That rock racing. I mean, bold. I mean, you've got to admire.
Amazing.
It was astonishing. I think it's still one of the all-time divisive, polarizing kits in cycling history, I think.
We're very pro rock racing kit here on this podcast.
Well, also Michael Ball was very quite a large character, right? So
yeah, he was the most Euro-American I've ever known. He's so Euro.
We like to think of ourselves as Euro, I guess Canadians in our case, but
okay.
But we can't compete with Michael Ball, though. It's true.
No, he was, yeah.
Lastly, Matt, can we be on an episode of the Café Ride?
We could talk about it. We
we know we're not famous enough. That was definitely a joke when we want to put you in a little corner. We're not at Café Ride levels yet, but maybe at some point.
I tell you what, though, I really would like to do, in all seriousness, a collaboration with you guys where there's no. We guys own the editorial, and it's just looking at some old kit, 30 years of old kit, and we just talk about it, and we rummage through somehow, even if we have to do it apart. But I don't know, it'd be fun.
That'd be amazing.
The archives seem incredible. There's definitely a lot of material,
and we love the history. I mean, we're definitely cycling fans. Alex and I have been in for not as long as you, but quite a long time, especially considering it's not that popular sport in Canada. So we love the history of it. And now to finish off, you said you've listened to a couple episodes, so we've hoped you've gotten to the end and you've gotten to into the Canal segment. If you don't know what that is, there's a canal in Montreal called the Lachine Canal, and we throw something from cycling in there each week that we don't like.
Ah, okay. So like 101 kind of vibe. Okay.
Yeah, and so, but also subsequently, we're going to give you the option. I think you're the first guest in the option. We have the reverse of that, which is called a Camillien, which is the hardest climb in the world in Montreal. Goes up the side of Mount Royal Mountain. And so that's our positive. If there's something you love about cycling, you want everyone to know or sort of check out. So you can either do 1-in-1 or a Canal and Camillien, but you have something for us, something positive or something negative.
I'm just trying to think of a negative. I mean, some of the, okay, a negative, but it was a strange positive, but it's a bit of a tech one, was in 1999 for the entire year, I rode with a pedal system called power pedals. And they had a clutch in the pedal, which meant you could only pedal forwards. So the pedals only rotate one way. So you couldn't ever pedal backwards on your bike. So it's like riding a track bike on the road. And I rode for the entire year when I was national champion with power pedals. They weighed about a kilogram. They're incredible. And the plates even more. Yeah, so I'd like to consign
That's
those.
Canal. You've Canal power pedals, unidirectional pedals. That's the oddest thing I've ever heard of.
Yes. Yeah, you guys seriously look up.
I can't believe someone thought of that on a road, but you're riding for 200, 250K and you can't even sort of back pedal for a second to burn out some lactic acid or loosen up your legs. That's bad. We've talked about really good engineering. That's bad engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I won a lot of races, weirdly. But yeah, they anyway, that's another video entirely. But the positive one, which is the mount, which was
Camillien Oud. It's the climb in the Grand Prix Cycliste de Montréal.
Oh yeah, so yeah, the roads of Cornwall. So Cornwall is in the southwest of the UK, of England, leads to Land's End, and it's the place where the Arthurian legend was. So Knights of the Round Table, King Arthur lived in that neck of the woods back in the day.
Like Penzance and that
exactly.
Yeah.
And I raced down there as a kid, and I spent all of my holidays as a youth there. My dad's from Cornwall; he lives there now. He's retired down there, and it's magical. So if you ever come to England to ride your bike, as well as riding up in the beautiful Peak District, head to Cornwall for some of the most magical roads you could ever ride on. And I think that's probably my favourite place in the world to ride. Is the coastal routes of Cornwall are absolutely magical.
Matt, lastly, where can our listeners find you in the coming months? Still commentating GCN Eurosports? Any other projects from you?
Yeah. So we've got some more Café rides coming up. So I'm off to Los Angeles to do some stuff with Zwift. And then you can listen to my podcast on Sigma Sports, which comes out every week. We're recommencing those this week. And then, subscribe to the Sigma Sports YouTube channel to watch the stuff that we put out. The Café rides are, I think, one of the things I'm most proud of. And I've got a lot of races coming up. I've got the European Championships on Sunday, Tour of Denmark, Tour of Britain. Then I'll be going over to the Tour of Lombardy, Lombardia for the Italians towards the end of the year as well. So I've got a lot coming up, and so I'll be all over the place really. But content-wise, Sigma Sports, head over there, and we've got the podcasts and the YouTube stuff.
Sounds good. Well, as I said, we were honored to have you on Cycling Fashion Week. It was a great discussion with you. Thanks very much for your time, Matt. It was a pleasure to have you, and you are now officially a friend of the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm truly honored, Tony, Alex, and Warren. Thank you very much indeed, guys, and catch up with you soon. Hopefully, I'll keep my big duffel bag ready and waiting for you.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Cheers, guys.
Okay, it's not because we just finished an interview with Matt Stevens that we are not going to do our flagship segment, which is Into the Canal. For our new listeners, Into the Canal is a segment where we throw something from the world of cycling or cycling fashion that we absolutely dislike into Montreal's scenic Lachine Canal. Alternatively, the opposite of a canal, which is when we want to highlight something that we really appreciate from cycling or cycling fashion, is called a Camillien, which is the Camillien Oud climb in Montreal, the hardest climb, the most steep, the most difficult climb in the world. Tony, why don't you start this week?
So for my Camillien this week, I am throwing EF Education Easy Post into the canal, and specifically for their use of white shoes. Now, it's been said, white shoes are never over. They're always important to have in your arsenal. So let's get that out of the way, that I'm not throwing white shoes themselves. It's just in this particular activity. I was watching the Vuelta. They're riding up in the bunch. They have their pink and green, their green bibs, their pink helmet, their pink socks, their pink jersey. The color combo's great. And then boom, the white shoes. And I'm just looking at it thinking, what a perfect opportunity to do green shoes. The pink socks with the green shoes, with the green bibs, with the pink jersey, with the pink helmet. It just would have been perfect. It would have tied everything together. It would have been kind of what we're saying, where like white shoes aren't over, but we need to like not be so married to them in everything we do. We need to think beyond. You know, I know that Nick at Velokicks could get it done if they weren't sure how to make them green. You know, Nick at Velokicks could definitely hook them up. And I think it's just such an awful missed opportunity for them to not do that and just go with white shoes, which although classic, and this situation just sort of leaves the kit lacking. It was very upsetting because everything else I sort of like, I really like about that color combo, that kit, and then the white shoes just threw it off for me.
By the way, first few stages of Vuelta, how boring was it? That has to be a Canal.
I mean, listen, the Dutch people are lovely people, but should they, and I mean, there's some great Dutch races, but whoever chose these particular stages, maybe those Dutch people should be in the Canal, because that was really hard to watch. I mean, that was a lot of cycling can be very boring, but that was I think stage 2 and 3 were almost identical in like every element of the makeup of the elevation, like one little like 4 category climb with 30K to go or something. And like, it was excruciating to watch, and it was just ruined so much by EF for having those white shoes.
Okay, can I do my Canal next?
Of course.
So this week, I am going to throw my co-host Tony into the Canal, and here's why. Last week, or actually a couple of weeks ago, since we're recording this a week before we post it, a couple of weeks ago, I went to Toronto on a business trip, and I went on a ride with Tony and with another friend. Warren was actually on vacation outside of the city. Normally, when I go to Toronto on business, I ride with both Tony and Warren because we're a big family here on Cycling Fashion Week, but Warren was away. So it was just Tony and I and another friend.
The community.
And I asked Tony to put together a ride that shows the best of Toronto cycling. And Tony said, sure, let's go to a place called Port Credit. Kind of a funny name when you think about it, maybe because people have big mortgages in Toronto, so it's called Port Credit. But he says, let's go there. It's a nice ride, chill ride. We're going to do this after work. And I'm like, Tony, you got it. No problem. Let's do that. And so we get on the ride and we start riding. And it's like these 4-lane boulevards with a gazillion cars on them. Then we take a turn. We go in front of some sort of correctional facility or a jail. Keep going a little bit. There's a cement plant. Then there's a water treatment plant. It wasn't exactly the scenic ride that I had been promised by Tony. And eventually there was a cobbled climb. That was nicer. But overall, I would say maybe not the best ride that Tony could have put together. So it was a lot of fun because I was with Tony, obviously, and he's good fun to be with on a ride. But as far as the actual parcours, that parcours, I think, is in the Canal, unfortunately.
I'm going to let Warren defend Toronto on this one.
By extension. No, but I remember about a month ago, I gave a Camillien to Toronto Cycling because you guys had put together a ride that was really nice. But for this particular ride, Tony is in the Canal.
But hang on here, because this was an evening ride. So first of all, I'm going to start by saying most morning rides and evening rides, you got like 2 hours tops usually. So you're not going to go very far. You're limited in your route choices. I'm not going to say Toronto's the best place for cycling, but the route Tony took you on, I know that route well, goes to the edge of Toronto. Tony and I live in the western end of Toronto, quite close to the edge of the city and where sort of it moves into suburbs. And any city, and I know this is true of Montreal, the edges of Montreal are not beautiful. They don't look great. That's what I'm going to defend Toronto about is, yeah, the edges of Toronto look like shit, but also it happens to be roads that, if he took you on the ones I'm thinking he did, and yeah, including, the jail that you featured in a reel on our Instagram. I know that stretch of road very well because the Fast Friday route that we often do goes along there. And that in the morning at 6 a.m. is actually a great stretch of road. Is it the most scenic? No, but I'm not really looking up too much when I'm, over my threshold on a fast ride I ride.
See, that's where I do want to defend myself a little bit. Is kind of what Warren's saying. Is the problem is, like any major city, it's not specific to Toronto. The traffic, especially kind of around and after work, 6 o'clock, is brutal, right? Toronto's rush hour, which I know is the same as Montreal, and obviously other major cities, it's basically 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. these days. And so essentially, you're fortunately don't get to choose on beauty. You've got to choose on kind of emptiness, right? Clearness for a sort of sense of safety, how few lights you can have. So that's kind of where my thinking was. It wasn't to give Alex the listen. I'm not going to deny. I mean, it's a very well designed jail for sure, but it's not the most beautiful thing in the world. But I was trying to give him the opportunity to have like a ride where he wasn't stopping every 3 seconds at a light or having cars whiz past him with 2 inches. So
he should have kept you to our little Western neighborhood bubble in Toronto, because that's like where a lot of the upper middle class people in Toronto live. So he should have just taken you to some loops there. You see the nice parks, nice gardens, and that kind of thing.
We're an upper middle class podcast as well.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say we were in conversation with our good friend David Millar, and he said if you come to Toronto, we can show you around. We've got cement plants and jails, and he said, well, we don't have that in Girona, so it's great.
Tony wanted to show me the jail to show me this is where I would end up if I wore black shoes with white socks. Okay, Warren, what do you got in the Canal this week?
This week, I have, I think, what may even be controversial for you two or for this whole podcast, because there's, I think in many episodes of the past, we've talked about this former pro cyclist, and some of us may have even referred to him as the GOAT. But I think maybe people don't always realize some of that is in jest to some degree, at least in the way we talk about it, at least for me. And I know I have called this guy a piece of shit before. So this week I'm going to throw Lance Armstrong in the Canal. This is partly because one of our listeners DM'd us on Instagram and was like, why does this guy get off so easy? Because there was a story posted by his We Do whatever company scam that is, and it was like a photo of Lance Armstrong on a mountain bike with like ankle socks. To their credit, they were making fun of him, and they were like, he's a 10 but wearing ankle socks. And this listener was like, how come you guys give Lance such a free pass? And as I said, I've more than once said I think Lance is realistically maybe a little questionable as a person, but I'm making it official. I am throwing him in the Canal. Lance is a 7-time Tour champion, but he is not a style icon. So like the ankle socks don't surprise me. He posted a photo recently, a non-cycling photo of him getting married to his who knows what number wife. And he was wearing running shoes, I think, with his suit or tuxedo. And we even commented on Instagram, Lance, we need to talk about these shoes. And he liked that comment. So maybe he's trolling us. Maybe he listens and he's trolling us.
Listen, okay, fine. You said you're not supposed to talk about Peyton Manning and Tom Brady or whatever because it's a North American centric thing, but Lance Armstrong is the Tom Brady and Peyton Manning is cycling. This guy listens to every podcast about cycling, everything about him probably. He's studying every comment that's ever been made. He's waiting to take us down with a liable suit.
And that's why he's in the Canal.
He's such an enigma that like I don't want him to be in the Canal, because you're right, he's got terrible style. He's patently uncool. The Live Strong bracelet was one of the world's great fashion crimes.
The We Do branding is also really bad.
Yeah, I mean the Live Strong. Listen, I don't want to a lot of cancer research funding and stuff. That's great, but just the aesthetic of seeing for years and years people wearing these awful piece of crap rubber yellow wristbands. And like everything he's done is hideous, but he's just such a maniac. And there's just something I appreciate so much about this sort of megalomaniac psychopath. Like, I mean,
there's a lot of maniacs in cycling, and maybe it's time we gave some appreciation to people like Bernard Hinault, or trying to think of a more modern day maniac. Pogacar is a maniac, like in a more positive way, I think, just because he seems to enjoy bike racing so much.
I need a negative maniac.
Well, who's somebody like Hinault? I know I'm butchering that pronunciation. I'm sorry, Alex.
Just say the
Hinault.
badger.
Hinault. Bernard Hinault. Yeah, the badger. Sorry. He's a great maniac, a great cycling maniac. I can't really think of a contemporary right now. But anyway, I'm just saying there's other maniacs we could celebrate. And maybe Lance's time in the sun as our celebrated maniac is over. And I'm not saying we ignore him. I can't disagree with you, Tony. He is a personality, a big personality in cycling. And you can't deny that, but he's in the Canal for a little while.
We need Chris Frooms to go off the rails.
Look, this talk is all sacrilege. I'm a Lance guy through and through. Warren, you just threw my teenage years in the Canal. Can't do that. I'm going to stand by Lance during this blasphemy.
Sorry, Alex. I just had to. Like, I don't want our listeners thinking we're giving him a pass.
No one disputes that he has bad style. I think that, and even when he was riding, like, I guess the ankle socks were a thing back then. Like, high socks were not mainstream, but I wouldn't say that he didn't care about style. He was just out there crushing.
Cared about performance and training and the right diet. And
Lance, if you're listening to this, and I know you are, we have offered to you to come on the podcast, bring your buddy Johan Brunel with you, and you can maybe hash this out with Jonathan Vaughters as well. I think you guys have a beef together, so we would love to help you settle that beef. But we'd also like to have you on the podcast, Lance, so we can talk about your philosophy when it comes to cycling style. It doesn't seem to exist very much, but maybe we can develop it live on the podcast. So open invitation to Lance Armstrong to come on Cycling Fashion Week.
I would also like that so I can talk to Jonathan Vaughters about the colors of ES shoes.
Okay, that's it for this week. Another episode of Cycling Fashion Week in the books. Thank you very much to Matt Stevens, who was very generous with his time, gave us a lot of good tidbits on the interview. It was really fun to have him on. Great conversation. Everybody loves Matt Stevens. Thank you very much, Matt Stevens. You are now a friend of the podcast, and we hope to have you again. Check out Matt Stevens on Instagram at @TheRealStevens. Check him out on YouTube, The Café Ride. Watch Pro Cycling on GCN Eurosport. He's got amazing commentary. You can find him there as well. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Tony. Happy 1-year anniversary to both of you as the co-founders of Cycling Fashion Week. We are 1 year old, and congratulations to you guys for that. It's been a fun ride to be alongside you guys for that. And thank you to our partners at Le Club, leclub.cc. Le Club believes that every cyclist should demand more from their cycling experience, and that is why you should go to leclub.cc right now and check out their incredible selection of the best, the coolest, the hottest brands in cycling kits, cycling fashion at the moment. They have a huge selection of MAP kit, and they actually keep releasing. Every time MAP has a new drop, Le Club has it. They do worldwide shipping, fast shipping, reliable shipping, so you'll have it pretty quickly. They also have cool brands like Albion, Universal Colors. They have Alba Optics, Sweet Protection Helmet. Check them out. They've got everything, and very, very good coffee roasted right here in Montreal. Thank you. Follow us on Instagram at Cycling Fashion Week. You can send us DMs, or you can send us emails at cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com. And we will be back in a couple of weeks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
I'm looking forward to our anniversary gift from Le Club.